Is it just me, or when others hear the Quatmalat say choose to live, do you think of that one scene from the original Ice Age movie?
I choose life.
Because I think about it literally all the time. Hello interwebs, it's time to yet again talk about my favorite franchise with Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 3, Choose to Live. Just to do the quick little housekeeping for those of you who may be new to my reviews, first off, welcome. And secondly, how these are typically structured is I do my spoiler-free discussions and thoughts up front, so if you haven't seen the episode yet, don't worry, we won't get into any like spoilerific-y stuff. You'll be all safe here. It's a safe space. And then we'll get into spoilers and I'll give a clear distinction of when the spoilers are going to happen. But with that being said, getting into the spoiler-free discussion, I have to say, I really liked the B and C plots of this episode. I think there were really great emotional moments and character beats throughout them that, honestly, some of them really, really moved me. And in fact, two distinct moments in the B and C plots of this episode around the character of Gray and one around the character of Book actually really hit me hard and got me kind of tearing up a little bit, and I thought were truly, truly excellent. However, that being said, the A plot of this episode, I really did not like. There were some things that I did like in there, namely the fact that this A plot was surrounding the Quatmalat and the Quatmalat nun. For those of you who don't remember, the Quatmalat are the warrior Romulan nuns that we met way back in Star Trek Picard Season 1, which are also one of my favorite parts of that show's first season as well. Again, wasn't the biggest fan of that season as a whole either, but I did like the addition of the Quatmalat, and they did come back in Star Trek Discovery Season 3 and at the episode Unification 3, and I liked how they were built out there, and I'm just liking the Quatmalat kind of being this element of modern Star Trek lore that is being built out and shared across the different Star Trek shows. And I think that that's honestly really cool to see, and I like that element of communication and the building out of lore here of this, new era of Star Trek. I think that's really, really cool. And I like the elements of that lore building that we see here with the Quatmalat. But the episode follows a Quatmalat nun who's kind of gone rogue and doing her own thing, and without spoiling how that plot eventually resolves and goes, I really felt that a lot of it left me questioning why this was even happening in the first place. There just felt like so many things happening just to make conflict occur, even to the point where there's a couple scenes in the episode where just action and fighting occurs, and it's just there for action and fighting to occur. And I'll talk a little bit more specifically about it, but it's just very overt how much they're just like forced conflict to get this storyline to happen. And while there are character beats within there around like Tilly and Burnham that I enjoyed, ultimately the logic gaps in it just left me very, very frustrated, and the forced action and forced like cool stuff on screen happening just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth and reminded me of some of the worst parts of modern Star Trek sensibilities, which is big explosions, big fights and things like that, where I'm like, the past two episodes, the things that I've loved about the show is, while I've enjoyed the action, that they felt rooted in character, whereas this one felt more like it was just trying to force conflict to happen in order for there to be conflict, and not really coming out of the character stuff or the situation going on. And so ultimately the A plot of this just left me feeling very frustrated and disappointed with that element of it as a whole. So looking at the entire episode, there are really great moments, especially in the B and C plots, that I deeply, deeply enjoyed. In fact, I think were absolutely excellent. But the A plot just felt really flat to me and kind of makes this a very mixed bag as an episode. One that I don't ultimately hate because there's other stuff that's propping it up. But if you're coming here for the main storyline of this episode, then I would say it's definitely a down. But that is everything I can really say spoiler-free. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, this is where you can get off after hopefully watching the ad that's about to play, because Jessie needs to pay her bills. But after the ad, we will get into spoilers. However, before we get much further, it's time to quick talk about my sponsor for the rest of my Star Trek reviews this year, The Geek Fight. The Geek Fight is a non-profit online store that fights for a diverse future. And they have two goals. Number one, create an easy way to learn about human rights thanks to their Lightbrary, a digital library with light content. Over there, you can find the stories of people fighting for human rights like the amazing Marsha P. Johnson, learn about how we can abolish and rethink policing, and find movies that represent disabilities beyond stereotypes, and even more. And number two, they hope to raise money for social causes. They have t-shirts, pillows, prints, etc. with human rights and geek designs, combining the best of both worlds. For example, I have this adorable bag which has this wonderful little trans badger on it. It's absolutely adorable, and all the money for things like this go to organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, which is an LGBTQ organization fighting for LGBTQ rights. So please go check out The Geek Fight. It's a wonderful place. You get to get yourself cool knowledge and cool nerdy stuff, and also support really cool stuff doing really great work. So please go check out The Geek Fight, and if you want 15% off all of your orders, use the promo code Jessie at checkout to get yourself that 15% off that I just mentioned. So thank you so much to The Geek Fight, and let's get back to the review. Alright, with that out of the way, let's dive into spoilers. And unlike the last two episodes where all the different storylines were kind of intermingling with each other, this episode is very much segmented into different, like 3 distinct storylines. So I'll kind of focus on each one individually as I do the breakdown and recap. Let's get the negative out of the way first and just really stick with the A-plot here. At the beginning of the episode, we see a Starfleet vessel is delivering dilithium. And by the way, the Starfleet vessel, it was like the USS Credence or something like that, and it looked like an Aurora and Nebula class had like a 31st century baby. I thought the ship looked kind of cool. But regardless, they're delivering dilithium, and they get attacked by Aquatmalat nuns, several of them, and they end up killing a Starfleet officer who distinctly did not choose to live. So he gets killed, and the dilithium gets stolen. But then this leads to a scene that I actually really liked back in Starfleet headquarters between, you know, the Federation president, Admiral Vance, Burnham's mother, who's a Quatmalat nun, as well as the Navari president. And I liked that the Federation president was incredibly smart about using this moment as a chance to build up the relationships between Navarre and the Federation and sort of like build that trust between them. It felt like a very tactical political move, because this could very easily been a situation where the Federation is like, one of your citizens attacked and killed one of our officers. This is going to create friction between us. But actually, she used it as a chance to say like, no, we're going to work together. It's going to be a joint task force. And Burnham will work with the Quatmalat nuns. Even the Quatmalat says like, we need to bring our sister in. We need to be at the head of this. And I just thought that was, I liked the politics game of that. And I thought that was a very smart tactical move by the Federation president working with the Navari president to sort of use this as a chance to bring people together instead of wedge them apart, which is cool to see. And then we also get the little reiteration of Quatmalat lore here that Quatmalat nuns do bind themselves to a lost cause, just like Elnor did way back in Star Trek Picard when he was helping Picard.
It met the requirements for worthiness. And it seemed like you needed me after all.
What is the requirement for worthiness?
A Galankai will only bind himself to a lost cause.
And I also like the Federation president showing confidence in Burnham. I mean, after the season premiere, we kind of felt a little bit of friction there. And so I like the Federation president sort of stating like, no, I believe in Burnham, even though I wouldn't put her in charge of my brand new ship. I do think she's a strong, capable commander. And again, I like the nuance here. And it's not just the Federation president is like evil politician, but more smart politician, which is something you don't often see in Star Trek. Star Trek is littered with terrible, obstinate bureaucrats.
I'm sure the authorities will be pleased by your diligence, Captain. I'm not so sure they'll appreciate the way you address a High Commissioner.
I'm in command here, Mr. Ferris.
And so I like seeing a politician who's actually just not nefarious and evil, but is tactically minded and knows the nuance of different situations. I thought it was very well done, and so I deeply liked this scene. We also get a scene between Tilly and Saru, where Tilly sort of says that she's trying to look for new experiences, trying to look for new things in her life. She's trying out mac and cheese. I don't know how she lived her life not enjoying mac and cheese. I mean, I don't even know if I can trust her now knowing that Tilly does not like mac and cheese. That's just somewhat unforgivable, to be quite frank with you. But I did really like the scene between Tilly and Saru. It felt very, again, I like their banter back and forth, and I always enjoy these two characters. They work really well together, and I just like Saru saying, it's best if you don't know what the root does in my room. I thought that was very funny. But does lead to an interesting question for me, because Tilly asks Saru if she can take care of his plants, and Saru says yes, but he's been away for 9 months. So who's been taking care of the plants while he's been gone? Like what was going on with the plants in the 9-month period that he was not there? These are the plot holes that I need answered, Star Trek Discovery. But then Saru recommends to Burnham that she take Tilly as a tactical officer, which feels silly to me. I get that Saru makes a good point to Burnham, like, Burnham's tactically trained, she doesn't need to have a tactical officer, but I feel like if you're going to bring a tactical officer, bring a tactical officer, as is clear in a few scenes down the road where they get attacked and Tilly just does not know what she's doing other than to, like, toss a sword. It's kind of like, I get that they don't know what to do with Tilly at the moment, and Tilly's also looking for stuff to do. It's very clear that the writers are like testing out stuff, but it's very clear that the writers are just like, let's put Tilly in this situation because we need her to have something to do in this scene and also kind of forward her arc a little bit. But it was just like, I don't know if I really buy the Tilly going as a tactical officer in such a dire and delicate situation that involves like literally bringing Navarre back into the Federation and is sort of hung on that. It's just like, it was like, not really loving it. And you can kind of see these are elements of like the forced nature of this plot that I'm kind of like balking at. And this forced nature of the plot gets even worse for me in a few moments where we have Burnham's mother, Tilly, and this other Quatmalat nun going off searching on this asteroid for Javina, who is the rogue Quatmalat nun. Well, I like the scene where Burnham's mother says that, you know, Javina was the one that helped nurse me back to health when I was stranded in the future. I really got frustrated at the scene directly after that where we have, I guess, a bunch of Quatmalat ninja nuns just faceless warriors appear on the ship and start attacking everybody, and they kill the extra Quatmalat nun who is not Burnham's mother, and Burnham's mother kills the rest of them. Again, we see Tilly not really knowing what to do. Why did Tilly not die in this situation, but the, like, actually trained nun gets killed? Like, Tilly should have been dead there. And then there's also this fact that, like, who are these extra Quatmalat ninjas that showed up? Like, there's no real acknowledgement of them. Who were they? Why were they with Javina? It seems for the rest of the episode that Javina was just sort of acting alone, but I guess she had people with her that just we don't care about because they're just cannon fodder to be killed. And at the end of the episode, they pray for the Quatmalat nun's sister that they brought with them, but they don't pray for these, like, cannon fodder people. And you just, again, I just get the sense that, like, this action scene happens just to have an action scene in the episode, and it was very, very frustrating to see that, because I don't dislike Discovery's action sequences. They're fine and I enjoy them, but I like them when they're germane to the plot, not just like, hey, let's have a bunch of people dancing around with swords for a few minutes and make you wonder why Tilly didn't get murdered. So I just did not like that at all. And this gets even worse when we have the crew go down into the like, basically what we learn is a cryostasis ship for these alien creatures who have been put in cryostasis, escaping their supernova planet. Well, I did like this set. The set looked really, the, like, digital set that they had for this, like, cryostasis chamber with all these aliens looked very cool, and it reminded me a lot of, like, the old original series, like, mystery space station alien civilization stuff that we saw in, like, the animated series and the Star Trek the original series as well. It started again leading to this question of when they discovered that the reason that Javina got the dilithium was because she wanted to move these cryostasis people out of the way of the coming anomaly, which makes sense, but again, we know that the Federation is just giving away dilithium, and there's, like, lip service paid to the fact that Javina says, like, oh, if I had asked for the dilithium, I would have had to reveal the location of these aliens, which you didn't have a right to do, which is fine, but it's like, but you killed a guy for this, and that just and while the guy, you weren't planning on killing him, it's like, I don't know if you had a right to do that, and it just feels so forced, especially when the Federation is not being stingy with dilithium. And so you get, again, it just, like, feels very, very forced to get this conflict to go off. And we also learn that, like, these aliens' bodies biomass has, like, latinum in it, which is why grave robbers are coming to steal it. It's just a lot of, like, jumps to, like, get conflict to happen that I'm like, just have a conversation. If people just had a conversation at any point in any of this, no one would have died, cannon fodder nuns would have died, and it just felt very, very forced to me. And eventually leads to the end of the episode where Burnham manages to talk the Quatmalat nun into reviving the people, which I feel like, again, would have been the first thing she would have wanted to do in this situation. Instead of, like, going through this whole background thing of, like, moving them with this dilithium, like, why wouldn't your first instinct be to resurrect them? And Burnham's able to do it in, like, 5 minutes. So even if you didn't want to ask for dilithium, just go find a scientist, kidnap them, have them rescue them, takes 5 minutes, and then you're off the planet. It was just so forced and frustrating, and I just did not really like it because it was just so forced. However, I will end on a positive with this storyline in that I did really like the moment where Burnham's mother and Tilly sit down. We get a furthering of Quatmalat lore where we learn that the phrase choose to live is actually part of a larger phrase. This path has ended, choose to live, or choose another path in your life, which obviously mirrors what Tilly is going through because she doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. I like the building out of Quatmalat lore there in order to also help service Tilly's arc, even though it also perfectly makes sense for the Quatmalat lore that we've been building out. So I like that element of it at the end here, but just the whole plot to get to these points and these character beats just did not work for me. However, with those negatives being said, let's move on to something that I actually really did like about this episode's the B and C plot. The first B plot that we have is with Book and Stamets going down to Navarre and the Science Academy for Stamets to make a case that this anomaly might be a primordial wormhole, but that he doesn't have any evidence of tachyons, which would indicate that that's the case. First off, I'm really liking this continued pairing of Stamets and Book. That's not a pairing after last episode that I would have like initially thought of between these two characters, but I like the show putting them together because I think they actually work very well together, and I like Stamets repeatedly showing concern for Booker's mental health and well-being. He even says, like, I don't want you to be re-traumatized when the Navarre president, like, offers a mind meld and offers to go and see, like, Navarre's past and offers to delve into his memory. Also, when he says, like, I'm gonna have to give a clinical description of the death of your homeworld, that's gonna be rough for you. I like his sense of concern for him. And it shows growth both on Stemmis's part, and I just like the connection between these two. But then we also get good moments between the Davari president and Book, because I was worried that Book, after the death of his planet, which again is a big defining traumatizing moment for the character, for sure. But I just hoped that his character wasn't going to just be like mopey for the rest of the season, like, oh, my whole family died, which again, I understand, but it's not like a fun dynamic to watch a character go through for 13 episodes. So I like that the Davari president sort of brings up this idea that, like, you need freedom from guilt, and it's not just like freedom from emotion, it's freedom from guilt. And I like this like evolved Vulcan sensibility of like being aware of that they try to suppress their emotions, but also being more emotionally aware, because they brought in the Romulans into the Vulcan family, of other people's emotional capabilities and awareness. I like seeing this evolved, like, nuanced sensibilities of the Vulcans through the Davari president here. And then we get the wonderful moment where the Davari president mind melds with Book, and Book has this moment where he sees his nephew for one last time in his memory through the mind meld, and his nephew smiles at him, and he knows that his nephew knew that he loved him. And it was just a nice moment for him to be able to not release his guilt, but begin to have some closure and process that guilt. And I thought that was just, it did almost bring me a little bit to tears in that moment. And I thought that was very, very solid. And I loved everything about that. So that B plot was really excellent. I love the final moment between Book and Burnham, where he's looking up at the like hologram of his forced home planet, and it still hurts, but it's something that he can now process and actually start addressing, because that's how you move through trauma. You sort of integrate it into your sense of self. You sort of like, you have to be like, this is part of me now. How do I move forward? And I thought that was really, really sweet. And this brings me to the other plot that I like, the C plot, where we have Gray being put into a new synth body. Now, I should say, last episode, I did mention in my review, I complained a little bit about the weird space magic with Gray being put into a synth body when we don't know like what he even is inside the Trill host. I will say, though, that I did forget that there was, in Deep Space Nine, we saw Jadzia Dax able to put like her previous host into other people's bodies. Like there's that wonderful episode where like Odo gets taken over by Curzon Dax, and it's a really fun, it's a fun episode. Also, Cisco gets to be a creepy, scary killer in that episode. It's great.
Pretty girl, Jadzia.
And so this kind of matches up with that a little bit, where if I believe that like, oh, they can kind of do the same thing with a Guardian, the Trill Guardian guy, and can put Gray into the synth body. So I guess there's it's still space magic, don't get me wrong, but there's precedent for it within Star Trek history. So I'll give it a little bit of a pass, even though it is space magic. But mind melds are space magic too. Star Trek has space magic. It's a thing. But regardless, I like the scene where, Adira's translating for Gray to the Guardian, who's the guy from last season. I like seeing him return here. And Gray saying, things like, I want to take this risk, I feel adrift elsewhere, and making that decision. And Adira, clearly, they're uncomfortable with that choice and doesn't want to lose Gray. And so I liked that little bit there. And then, Adira is clearly having a hard time just sitting there waiting. I mean, as anyone would, waiting for their loved one to see if they're living or dying. And so they take a walk to apparently Discovery's new bar, which has even a Ferengi bartender. If you saw in the background, there's a Ferengi bartender in that Discovery bar. Also, that bar looks sexy as hell. Like, that bar is fancy. It's a fancy bar, and I'm here for the Discovery bar. It's nice. I hope they reuse that set, because it was very sweet. Also, it had a dartboard, very Deep Space Nine. I like the Deep Space Nine dartboard there. But again, like Culber giving good advice to Adira, saying, it wasn't your choice to make, and sometimes we just have to find connection with others, leading Adira to go back and, sit by Gray's side, and actually brings him back to his body, because he has Adira there to help guide him. And I thought that was so sweet. Okay, so this is Jessie from the future. I can't believe I forgot to mention with this section with Adira and Gray is that this whole bit is so totally meant to clearly evoke like a gender confirmation surgery. Now, obviously, it's equatable to like anybody worrying about a loved one going through surgery, but considering that like Gray literally chose his body, and we got a reference to transition last episode, this whole sequence with Adira and Gray just reads as Gray getting a gender confirmation surgery, and Adira just being there and just being worried about him as he's just lying on the table afterwards. I mean, I had a gender confirmation surgery. My parents came to be with me, and while they were waiting for me to come out of surgery, they were worried about me the entire time. And of course, like, again, this evokes any type of surgery, but again, considering that Gray literally evoked the word transition and talking about like bodies and being in a body that you've always wanted and building your own body. This whole bit just really read like a sci-fi gender confirmation surgery, which I absolutely love because it is with a transgender character who is explicitly transgender, while also having the weird sci-fi stuff on it. Not like Jessie. As much as I love her, she was just the sci-fi stuff and not explicitly trans. And so I like to have an explicitly trans character going through something that is similar to gender confirmation surgery, but not actually gender confirmation surgery and not defining his character by that. And so I thought it was just a cool little subversion of that and exactly what I think Star Trek should be doing. Having explicit trans representation, having explicit representation, but allowing these characters just to evoke certain elements of their experience, but not have it be literalized, because in the future we would have moved past those sort of things. Like, I feel like gender confirmation surgeries, as we saw in Star Trek Deep Space Nine with that terrible episode with Quark, terrible episode, what as we saw there, like, they can just hand out gender confirmation surgeries in the future like candy. So I think it was just, I like this sort of evocation of that without it being literal. And I can't believe I forgot to mention that during my actual review, and I just wanted to state it here. And also the hug that Gray gives Adira and also to Culber was just also heartwarming. Like, I did cry a little bit. I wasn't like weeping, but I did get misty-eyed at that moment as well. And it just showed me, like, I really loved that beat of it. It was just, it warmed my heart. And again, I have to say how wonderful it is for my favorite franchise to just have this queer found family in it. And it really means a lot to see that. It really, really does. And the warmth and heart that all of these actors and the writing have given to these scenes and these beats. And I have to say that I've been absolutely loving all of that, everything to do with these characters over the past 2 episodes. And that continues in this episode. I also should say, too, that there is a scene in this episode where Saru and Culber sit down, and Saru acknowledges that Culber has been made into the ship's counselor. So I had a complaint about that last episode. I was like, when did he become a counselor? Do we get any acknowledgement of that actually being a thing? We finally get an acknowledgement of it here. I'm glad it's made, like, official in some capacity, even if it's an aside. But it was just nice to know, because I was kind of like, I get it, he's the counselor now, but, like, can we get some confirmation of that at some point? So that was also nice to see. And also the acknowledgement that Culber has basically become a parent. And I just like Saru acknowledging that. It was just the moment between Saru and Culber, who are the most empathetic characters on the show. Just having a moment to like sit back in the bar and just connect, I thought was nice. So ultimately, that's my thoughts on this episode. The B and C plots I thought were very heartwarming, had some really wonderful, like absolutely tear-jerking moments for me that I really, really loved. And I just love the small character beats littered throughout both of those stories, as well as even some of the small character beats in the A plot. That being said, this whole episode as a whole is still dragged down by the forced nature and the needless action of the A plot. So on the whole, I will say this episode shines where Discovery has always shined, in its character beats, in its character moments, in its small scale emotional moments. And where it fails is where Discovery has kind of always failed, when it tries to force conflict, force action, have big action beats for the sake of action. And it's been doing so well in the first 2 episodes of the season that it was a little bit disappointing to see it come back here in episode 3. But I'm hopeful that this is just a one-off. It's not going to be indicative of the whole season, so we'll see going forward. So on the whole, mixed bag of an episode, but it was definitely the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. So it kind of averages out in the middle, even though there are things that I loved and things that I really hated in this episode. But that's everything that I had to say about this episode, so I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well for more of my reviews of Star Trek Discovery and other video essays and things like that. And don't forget I have a Patreon that helps supporting me doing what I do. But beyond all of that, I just hope that you, as always, live long and prosper.